Live-action anime adaptations are currently in an interesting spot. Before the 2020s, almost all live-action adaptation attempts, especially those from Hollywood and America, were universally hated. But now, after the release of Netflix's One Piece and Yu Yu Hakusho live-action series, there's sentiment of hope in the community. Maybe they can be good. And I think they can. Adaptation is something that can lend itself to elevating an original work by properly utilizing the qualities of what makes a particular medium unique. That's why I appreciate the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4 live-action movie, and how it manages to fix one of the major issues I have with the main antagonist of the first arc of the part, Keicho. Now, in order to see what the live-action adaptation did well, we have to first take a look at what it adapts. So let's dive into the first two arcs of Part 4, Josuke Higashikata meets Angelo and the Nijimura brothers. Both of these arcs in the manga contain some of the strongest storytelling and setup in not just the part, but also the entire series, which is what makes its flaws stand out even more. Josuke Higashikata meets Angelo is a fantastic introductory arc that has Jotaro Kujo, the protagonist from the previous part, helping Josuke defeat a serial killer turned stand user named Angelo, who's running rampant in his hometown of Morio. The arc is great at establishing Josuke as our new protagonist, by having his much goofier and lighthearted nature contrasted with our older protagonist Jotaro's more serious one. And where the arc really shines is in its conclusion, because it answers the question presented at the beginning of the arc with an answer that only gives us more questions about the future of the series. At the start of the arc, there's a major question of how did Angelo obtain a stand. Previously in the series, the only characters we'd seen obtain a stand later on were the members of the Joestar family after Dio mysteriously gained one. But in his last few moments before defeat, Angelo tells us the story of how he obtained a stand. Half a month before his execution, Angelo was lying in a cell one night until a figure in a school uniform came out of the darkness, and before he could react, the figure took an old-looking bow and arrow and shot him in the back of the throat. But instead of killing him, Angelo remained alive. And as the man ripped the arrow from his throat, he congratulated him on surviving and becoming a stand user. He then leaves, telling Angelo to meet him in Morio, where he's trying to find even more stand users. This is a fantastic setup for the next arc. Angelo, who we'd once only seen as a standalone threat, is now revealed to only be a symptom of a larger problem. We learn of a new method of obtaining a stand, the stand arrow, which if it chooses you, will not kill you despite you receiving a fatal blow. And this new item will not only cause huge waves throughout the rest of the part, but also throughout the rest of the series. And a mysterious character is creating new, potentially dangerous stand users in Josuke's own hometown. And this character is the main antagonist of our next arc, Keicho Nijimura. Our next arc, the Nijimura brothers, starts as Josuke and Koichi stumble upon an old house where two brothers lie in wait for them. These brothers are Okuyasu, a stand user who has the ability to erase anything from reality, but is too stupid to properly utilize this terrifying ability, and his older brother Keicho, the mysterious figure who was giving stands to several people in Morio. Josuke quickly defeats Okuyasu and then goes to fight Keicho in order to save his friend Koichi, who has just been shot by the arrow. After a bloody battle, Keicho is defeated by Josuke, who manages to use his own stand against him. And with that, we move into the conclusion of this arc, which is one of my favorites in Part 4 because how well it creates such a sympathetic motivation for why Keicho does what he does, elevating him beyond a typical antagonist. Before leaving the Nijimura house, Josuke and Koichi go to retrieve the arrow, but are stopped by a hideous creature that grabs Koichi's leg. While distracted by this mysterious thing, an injured Keicho manages to crawl into the room and grab the arrow before Josuke can. Seeing as how Josuke has seen the creature he's been trying to hide, Keicho explains why he needs the arrow. The monster that is before us is his father. Growing up, he was an abusive man who would beat both Keicho and Okuyasu. But one day, on the same day that Dio was killed by Jotaro, instead of arriving home to abuse, Keicho found his father mutating into something horrific. He was one of Dio's followers who had a flesh bud implanted in his head, and with Dio's death, the flesh bud fused with his father, turning him into an immortal monster with no apparent memories of who he was, only being able to produce grunts from his mouth. Keicho explains that he's been searching for standards who can finally kill his father. With his father's death, he can finally start living his own life. With this, we can see that Keicho is a tragic character. A complete inverse from the pure evil Angelo we had met before. The inability to live a normal life, because of what happened to his father, threw him down a murderous path where he killed several people in order to find the proper stand user. For every stand user he found, the arrow must have killed so many others who weren't chosen. It's a path he can't leave anymore. We see this when Josuke repairs what appears to be garbage that the Nijimura's father seems to be fiddling with. But when repaired, it is revealed that he wasn't just playing with trash. He was trying to put together the family picture. Despite everything, there is still a little bit of their father left in this creature. After this, Josuke says that he'll help them find a stand user, but one who will cure their father, not kill him. Okuyasu comes into the room, and even he agrees that they should find someone to cure him, the picture acting as proof that there is a chance. But Keicho can't. He yells that he's already killed too many people to stop now, and that's where the real tragedy of his character lies and what makes him such a strong antagonist in Part 4. In a way, his goals are noble. Despite all the abuse that he suffered from his father, he still wants to give his dad a proper end. But just like his father, he picks a much more destructive path than he should. He's someone who's dedicated his life to a cause where a better, more peaceful solution was always there, but he was too blinded by pain and anger to see it. And while this conclusion is such a strong piece of writing for Keicho's character, it has a major flaw which hinders the impact that should be here. A lot of this conclusion on his character relies on telling us instead of showing us. He tells us that it's already too late for him. He tells us he's already killed too many people, but we've never seen him kill anyone. We can imply he has, but because we're not shown this organically throughout the story, it's only really revealed to us in this one line of dialogue he has at the end of the arc. While his backstory reveal was a great way to show his motivation, this one line of dialogue about how he's killed too many people feels more like a quick justification on why Keicho has to die at the end of this arc, instead of being a redeemed character like Okuyasu. Which I think is a shame because really analyzing this line, it could have been so much more. If Keicho was more present in Part 4, Araki could have added small scenes where we see him going around Morio, using the arrow on other people who do not survive. For someone who says he's used the arrow many times, we only see him use it twice, once on Angelo and once on Koichi, both people who end up surviving. Most of the stand users we find on Morio exist because of him. For a character who has so much weight on the story, we hardly really get to see him. There's so much rich content in Keicho's character, which is only really told to us in lines of dialogue before his death. There's just so much that could have been shown on why he's no longer redeemable instead of him just telling us. And because everything else about him, from his setup to his motivations, are so good, it makes this aspect really stand out. And that's where the JoJo Part 4 live-action movie comes in to fix that. The movie is directed by Takashi Miike, most known for directing films like Ichi the Killer. I think he adds much needed style to the movie, and it's clear he loves the source material. But admittedly, excluding the aspects of the movie that are really good, the Part 4 movie is very mediocre. It's an adaptation of the two arcs we just discussed, but condensed to fit within the structure and length of a feature film. When condensing long-form works into films, like a book adaptation, it is much more than just making it shorter. Part 4, like every other manga and long-form story, is made up of several small arcs, ebbs and flows of the story that keep the audience's desire to experience a full story satisfied, while also promising that there's a much larger story that needs to be completed. A standard movie is only one arc, typically following a 3-act structure, so it means that an adaptation must follow in suit in order to satisfy an audience. That's where a character like Keicho can shine. Because the movie is not containing the ebb and flow of a singular arc instead of two, means that Keicho, within the structure of the story, is much more present because he acts as our main antagonist, and we're able to see a satisfying build-up and payoff to his character that we did not see in the original source material. Where the movie doesn't work are the areas where it fails to properly adapt the arcs into a typical feature film structure, and falls into just doing a straight adaptation of the manga, leading to awkward pacing. There's also a huge plot hole where Angelo in the movie offers to kill Keicho's father, but Keicho threatens him in response, which goes completely against his motivations, making his motivations skewed and confused in the film. Isn't his whole goal to kill his father, so why reject Angelo here? On top of that, the ending of the film is divisive, and it's debatable if it was the correct choice to pick, having sheer heart attack kill Keicho instead of Red Hot Chili Peppers. But moving past its flaws, let's look at how the movie improves Keicho's character. The opening of the film starts not with Koichi or any of our protagonists, but instead with Angelo. He sits in a dark apartment eating a meal, his victims tied up on the ground. The police are knocking on the door trying to get in. Then, Angelo makes his escape. But as he evades the authorities, he runs into a dead end where a boy in a school uniform, Keicho, blocks his path. Not saying a word, he raises a bow and arrow and lands a fatal blow on Angelo. As he lays there choking, Keicho retrieves the arrow from Angelo's body and explains that gravity has brought them together. He then leaves before the police arrive at the location, and as the beams of the searchlight land on Angelo, he rises with a gush of water behind him. This opening is great at setting up both our antagonists for the film, and also setting up the mystery of Keicho's character. Instead of having his flashback be at the end of Angelo's arc, it is what we first open up on, and we get to see Keicho much earlier, setting up the questions in our head of who is he? What are his motivations? Why is he using the bow and arrow on people? All at the beginning, so that throughout the entire film, we want to find out. It also acts as a better setup to concepts that are introduced later in the series, such as the idea of stand users being attracted to each other due to the gravity of destiny. This structure of story that has Keicho be the main focus was simply not as effective in the manga, and the reason is because the ebb and flow that long stories need that I talked about before. In the manga, Both Angelo and Keicho's arcs acted as separate stories that led into each other by having their conclusions make you want to ask more questions, and in turn make you want to come back for more. However, because the film's acting as one whole story, it doesn't need to have these questions appear in the middle to bring an audience back for a second story, so it means the film can ask these questions in the beginning, and now it acts as the instigator for all the events that will follow. And the movie takes full advantage of having access to Keicho early in the story. Within the first act, alongside getting to know Josuke more, we get to see the path that Keicho went down that made him irredeemable. In the dead of night, a disgruntled office worker lets out his frustration to the bridge, yelling about how much he hates his coworkers. After his outburst, he looks up to see Keicho staying on the other side, preparing to launch an arrow. The arrow goes flying and hits the man. Keicho walks over to him, wondering out loud if these feelings of anger are strong enough to become something greater. However, the man eventually stops moving, and a disappointed Keicho rips the arrow out of him. In this very short scene, the movie manages to fix my major issue of the manga. We actually get to see Keicho killing innocent people in order to create these stand users. His nonchalant attitude at the death of this man shows us that he isn't the first or last person that Keicho is willing to kill. The death of these people is merely a sacrifice he's willing to make for his goal. This one scene shows us so much about his character, with it explicitly telling us, and all before his fight with Josuke. And before his final battle he has with Josuke, we receive even more scenes like this. There's one where he meets Angelo again, and a scene where he has a one-on-one conversation with Okuyasu, something they weren't able to do in the manga because of the way the story was told. Thanks to the structure of a feature film, Keicho was able to be even more present within the story, allowing for a fantastic arc with him as the main antagonist. I think it's a shame that the rest of the movie was so mediocre, because with Keicho, it showed it had potential. But because it was a commercial failure back when it was released in 2017, I doubt we'll see a sequel or any other live-action JoJo's adaptation anytime soon. Adaptations can sometimes have a bad rap, because translating a story into a different form of media is hard. And watching something that you love not live up to your expectations can be painful. But even in mediocre ones, we can still find the beauty that comes with change. Thank you to my first patron, Pink Pancreas, for the support. If you'd like to support me more, my Patreon is in the link in the description.